English in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South, and I am Sweeney Gray. The Workers' Party in Brazil has handed over the presidential candidacy to Fernando Haddad. He will replace former President Luiz Ignacio Lula da Silva in the electoral race. The decision was made at the party's extraordinary meeting in Curitiba. Hundreds of people supporting Lula have gathered outside the prison where he's being held.
Haddad is the voice of Lula. We won't need to tell the people this. Lula is still the candidate, but under the name of Fernando Haddad. It's the same program, it's the same project.
And our correspondent in Brazil, Andre Vieira, has more details.
September 11 is a historic day for Brazil because it is a day to reaffirm once again that Lula da Silva is suffering through a process of political, media and judicial persecution so they can remove him from the electoral race here in Brazil. But it's also the day in which Lula da Silva will be replaced by Fernando Haddad in the elections to take place on October 7th. Social movements are intensifying their struggle to reaffirm Lula's innocence, but also in support of Fernando Haddad, that they say will be the legitimate representative of Lula da Silva in these coming elections. They are also calling for return to democracy after the coup in 2016.
Thank you, Andre. Meanwhile, hundreds of people in Sao Paulo have taken part in an event in defense of science and technology universities, and they're also asking for Lula to be freed.
During the military dictatorship of 1964, the Pontifical Catholic University of Sao Paulo gave shelter to professors and intellectuals who had to flee military persecution. The Tucarena Theater was the setting for two elections that sought to combat the regime and suffered through two different fires that left their mark on the walls. This was the scene of a historical meeting between members of the Workers' Party.
This act is taking place without presence of the most important president in Brazil's history. Today, Lula's grandson, Tiago, is taking the place that was kept for our leader. Nonetheless, today we are here to defend education, culture, justice for Lula and for all Brazilians. He still leads all the polls. He's still our candidate.
Activists continue to call for Lula's freedom. Calls for him to be allowed to run have been reinforced by the announcement from the UN's Human Rights Council, which said a Lula presidential bid is not optional.
The sovereignty of the Brazilian people is being stolen. We are not allowed to vote for our candidate. We are very worried about the way forward. We feel anxious. We are not only fighting for democracy, but also for our own future.
Fernando Haddad had an important role in improving education for the people. He gave children a chance, despite widespread inequality. Opportunities only exist if there's quality public education, from preschool until university.
In the latest polls, Fernando Haddad is tied with Ciro Gomes, Marina Silva, and Geraldo Alckmin. These polls also show he would beat far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro in a runoff election.
Thousands of Venezuelans have taken to the streets to reject U.S. intervention attempts. This after the New York Times exposed how high-level U.S. officials met with members of the Venezuelan army to try to oust President Maduro. They also commemorated the 45th anniversary of the coup d'etat in Chile. And Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arias has condemned the siege against Venezuela at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. He said the measures taken by the US and the European Union have promoted a financial blockade. Arias also met with the new UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, to discuss Venezuelan migration throughout the region. He also asked the Human Rights Council to be fairer in their rulings. And a march against U.S. attempts at intervention in Venezuela is planned for Thursday. This comes after the New York Times reported U.S. high-level officials allegedly met with members of the Venezuelan army to oust President Maduro. The report says the conversations between the coup plotters began in August 2017. The Venezuelan government has condemned the reported actions of the United States. Rodriguez also said the government is preparing international action to protect Venezuelan immigrants.
We are preparing an international action aimed mainly at three events: that are already fully demonstrated. 1 is slave labor, 2 xenophobia and hate crimes, and 3 brutal abuse against Venezuelan women and children.
President Nicolas Maduro has announced his government will sue Colombia. He wants compensation for the social support Venezuela has provided to over 5 million Colombian immigrants. Maduro has also condemned xenophobic campaigns against Venezuelan migrants throughout Latin America.
I have approved this idea of putting forth an internal demand to request compensation for the Colombian government for the 5.6 million of Colombians who are living here.
45 years after the military coup of Augusto Pinochet, Chile still remembers the horrors of that day and the 17-year regime that followed.
Every September 11, Chile awakens more silent than usual, with the feeling that no matter how much time has passed, things are still not right.
Today is the anniversary of the military coup which put an end to democracy. I'm too young to give an informed opinion if the actions of that day were justified, but I believe that bombing the presidential palace is not the way to defend our nation.
There were so many detained, so many disappeared and tortured. Their family members joined the crowd of mourners.
I don't have a name for it. It was painful. I would be waiting to buy bread, and members of the military would attack us. There are so many more things not worth remembering.
What does today signify for you?
Pain. My dad was taken to the National Stadium, where so many people were killed.
Was your dad one of the many disappeared?
Yes, I still don't know where he is.
This is why memory matters, reconstructing the events of that day over and over again. Projects like Timeless Pictures represent this idea by merging historical pictures with current image. Many initiatives are defying indifference and impunity traits, words that are becoming more frequent following the recent freeing of members of the Pinochet administration accused of murder and torture. Mireia and her brother's story are part of one of the most heartbreaking projects, a documentary that reconstructs his final moments as a prisoner in Dawson Island.
Our conviction remains strong despite the passage of time. Time will not lead to forgetting. It will only lead to the strengthening of our will for truth and justice for the victims.
Another art project being held this year is the digital recreation of the faces of those who were lost so their families may see how they could have aged. This is what they would look like today, they say, in between laughter and tears.
We are calling out impunity. There are those who walk away free, free of our suffering, free of losing loved ones. That can no longer be. My brother will never come back.
Projects like this not only reveal the link families have with their lost loved ones, but the link a nation has with its past.
Nicaragua's President Daniel Ortega has handed over command of the National Police to Francisco Diaz. The transfer took place during the Army's 39th anniversary. Ortega also paid tribute to the 22 officers killed during the protests that had taken over the country since April. We'll take a short break now. More news in a few.
So yeah, national security is one of the most powerful notions in modern times. To swindle, I think, people, to do things that are not in their best interest, and to support massive military complexes that are not in anybody's interest, but that are like cancers feeding on society.
Watch a series where the U.S. geopolitical strategies as an empire representing the culture of war and propaganda are shown, and how this has served as a tool of social control. War. Saturday, Unión Telesur.
Welcome back. Social organizations are mobilizing in Buenos Aires against the neoliberal policies of the government. Our correspondent in Argentina, Edgardo Esteban, has those details.
No to
the IMF and enough suffering are some of the mottos in the protests that social organizations and trade unions are holding in different spots of the city of Buenos Aires. The main one outside the Argentinian Congress, demonstrators want to highlight the difficult situation the most vulnerable people are suffering. The attendance to Soup Kitchen has tripled, especially children. These initiatives do not receive any funding or support by Mauricio Macri's government. These protests are aimed at preparing the strike that the public trade unions have prepared for this Wednesday. Teachers will also go on strike on Thursday. Tensions remain in Argentina since neoliberal policies were imposed by Macri. On September the 24th, a massive demonstration is also planned and called for another strike on September the 25th.
Workers in Costa Rica continue their week of protests. Thousands of workers from the public services have marched in the capital San Jose to support the open-ended strike that began on Monday. They are angry about the government's fiscal reform plan. Workers say it will negatively affect the most vulnerable. They also believe the new measures won't help the country's economy.
They shouldn't raise the basic needs products by 1%, because there are people in this country in extreme poverty, and the only thing it will do is to make the citizen who does not have to eat suffer more.
This is a movement that continues. It is a movement of an indefinite nature, and tomorrow we will be in the streets again.
Panama and Colombia have announced a roadmap to solve their bilateral trade conflict. The announcement was made by Presidents Juan Carlos Varela and Ivan Duque after their meeting in Panama City. This comes after businessmen in Panama asked for sanctions against Colombia. They are angry about the tariffs imposed by Colombia on Panamanian products. The two countries also discussed cooperation in the fight against drug trafficking. And Colombians are expressing their discontent with the policies of Ivan Duque's government. While there's no budget for education, pensions, or public health, the government has announced tax cuts for companies.
The increase in value-added tax for basic products was one of the deficit-reducing policies Minister Alberto Carrasquilla announced.
I hope that they don't increase taxes on vegetables or rice. We are poor and we can't afford that for our whole family.
They will affect vulnerable families if he adds taxes to things that didn't have them before.
This would harm thousands of campesinos who work hard every day to sell their products. It would also hurt millions of Colombians without enough income to even pay these extra taxes.
People won't buy fruits and vegetables anymore if VAT increase.
Citizens say it is unacceptable that taxes are being lowered for entrepreneurs. At the same time, the government announced there is neither a budget for education nor health subsidies. No doubt the poor would be the hardest hit.
They want to increase taxes for the middle class, and as Carrasquilla announced, on basic products. This means that they will make the workers pay for this millionaire bill. This will surely increase poverty.
Some analysts say Alberto Carrasquilla represents the interests of Colombians' neoliberalism. He privatized different companies during his time as minister under Álvaro Uribe's government.
Es un hombre que está acostumbrado a trabajar para el capital.
This man is used to working for capitalism, against the workers. Everything he does worsens inequality. He will always support these kinds of measures.
Conducen a profundizar en la desigualdad.
Social investment will be affected. However, wars surely won't, and big companies' budgets will remain unaffected.
No toquen los que tienen dividendos.
They won't touch Colombia's business sector. They also won't touch the riches of the Artila Lule or Sarmiento Angulo families. They protect the rich.
Different social sectors say Duque's right-wing policies only serve to increase inequality and poverty. That's why they will take to the streets to protest the tax reform proposed by the National Treasury Minister.
Residents of the Chilean communities of Puchuncavi and Quintero are protesting against the environmental crisis in the area. Meanwhile, the Health Commission has already met to find a solution. Our correspondent, Thierry Valenzuela, has the details.
The Health Commission has met to discuss the massive poisoning that occurred in the coastal area in the communities of Puchuncavi and Quintero. A few weeks ago, at least 30 students were poisoned and taken to the hospital with nausea and paralysis. A few days ago, the number of victims rose to 300. The two affected communities have shown the highest levels of cancer in the country and also several cases of miscarriages. An industrial plant has been located in the area since the 1970s. Residents in the affected area have protested and asked the government to guarantee for the safety of their life.
More than 1 million people have been evacuated from the east coast of the United States as Hurricane Florence is approaching. The Category 4 storm is said to be the most powerful to menace the region in nearly 30 years. Authorities have warned of torrential rains and flooding across several states. Meanwhile, Isaac still poses a threat to some Caribbean islands. A hurricane watch has been issued for Guadeloupe, Martinique, and Dominica, and a tropical storm watch is in effect for St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, and Montserrat. Additional watches could be issued for the remainder of the Leeward Islands later on Tuesday.
We all have vividly in our memories what happened to us in respect to Hurricane Maria and the speed at which it moved from a Category 3 to a Category 5, which was the quickest in history, 36 minutes. And we all suffered at the hands of Hurricane Maria. So as far as the National Emergency Planning Organization is concerned, we are taking no chances. And we're leaving no stone unturned in respect to the preparation of the state, the country, and its citizens.
An evangelical church bought the stadium of one of Peru's most popular football clubs and turned it into a symbol of the conservative movement.
This was the stadium of Club Alianza Lima. Today it is property of the Evangelic Church Aposento Alto. What are you expecting of this space from now on?
Christ is alive, Christ is alive, Christ is alive.
Alianza Lima is one of the two most important soccer teams in Peru. Their fans and leaders are not willing to lose part of their home, accusing the church of taking advantage of its political and economic power to buy the stadium.
This is an abuse. This is the home of the people. This is the home of Alianza Lima. They can't invade this space in the name of religion.
It is like my house and heart are stained. This hurts me.
Some evangelic churches have bought important coliseums, movie theaters, and other buildings as well.
This is not about them getting a bigger space for the congregation. This shows how powerful and influential they are. They don't choose just any place.
Researcher Juan Fonseca says churches ally with conservative parties. They use their influences and millionaire resources to impose their dogmas against women's rights, the LGBTI community, or the gender equality on education.
Their career in politics follows the idea that the country has to be submitted to their rules, to their norms. They think they are right. This comes from their religious thinking. It's what some analysts call fundamentalism.
Agua Viva is one of the churches investigated for money laundering. Currently, churches are exempt for paid taxes and their resources are not being audited.
Work continues in Rio's National Museum to recover its artifacts a week after a devastating fire. The priority is to secure the building and start the long and meticulous work of saving what remains of their collection. But experts are afraid most of them are lost. One of the museum's directors lamented the lack of resources given to the institution.
The resources of the administration of the Museum for Emergencies work renovations were absolutely insufficient. It was only enough to buy light bulbs and toilet paper. That's all we could buy.
Peru has recovered a priceless pre-Columbian gold mass from Germany. The repatriated 8th century treasure is a funeral mass from the Sican culture. President Martin Vizcarra hailed the country's battle to recover its cultural treasures. Germany returned it after 20 years of litigation. The Sican culture lived in the north coast of Peru roughly between the years of 750 and 1375. And it's been almost 1 year since the earthquake that shattered Mexico City. Our Pablo Perez gives us an update.
When the earthquake alarm goes off, the response is immediate. The students at this college instantly abandon their classrooms and follow instructions to evacuate. Experts from a research institute say such training saved lives during the September 19th earthquake.
That very same day, there was a drill hours earlier, which meant people were very aware of what they should do if there was an earthquake.
At this forum, 19S, Mexico, 365 days after the earthquake, experts from different fields talk about the effects of the quake. For this psychologist, the constant drills do save lives, but they ignore the emotional harm that may be caused.
We begin to think of it as something natural. Oh yeah, the alarm went off. And we evacuate the area with our phone in our hands, but we no longer consider it serious. It becomes an ordinary, everyday part of life. And it should not be like that.
Another big impact is the visible damage caused by the earthquakes across the city. Damage it will take a lot of time to repair, and often only by the efforts of the victims themselves.
From what I've seen, it'll take around 10 years. While the neighbors come to an agreement, then the expert opinion is sought and the project is developed. It's very hard.
38 buildings in the city collapsed, but many of those still standing remain a possible danger.
We've listed some of the buildings as uninhabitable, but there are still people living in them because they say they don't have anywhere to go. It's a very difficult problem.
According to official figures, 1 year after the earthquake, there are still 349 buildings left to demolish, of the 411 that were damaged beyond repair. 983 buildings, like this one, are classified as high risk after the September quakes. The victims, like these residents of the Tlalpan housing estate, say it seems they are still not a priority for the government.
We'll take a short break now. World News is next. Welcome back. Russia and China have pledged to strengthen bilateral ties and promote world peace. China's President Xi Jinping held talks with Russia's leader Vladimir Putin on Tuesday. Russia's deputy minister stressed the importance of the commitment made by both leaders at the 4th Annual Eastern Economic Forum.
Both China and Russia need Vladivostok to function as a platform to communicate, make decisions, and sign agreements. And the exchanges between the leaders of the two nations during the forum are especially meaningful. So I think the forum is very important as for both the economic and political aspects.
Russia has begun one of its largest military exercises to date. Over 300,000 troops are participating in the drill. More than 36,000 military vehicles and 1,000 aircraft will take part in war exercises. Chinese military personnel will also participate in the 5-day-long event held in the Trans-Baikal region in eastern Russia. 43 countries have gathered to discuss in the World Economic Forum for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in Vietnam this Tuesday. Over 1,000 people will participate in the event to discuss development throughout the region, comprised by the bloc's countries. Further integration and the use of new technologies are the main topics on the agenda. A transportation route consisting of land and sea has boosted trade significantly among northeastern Asian countries. The route opened in 2016 and it has contributed to economic development between China, Russia and South Korea. It has since become an important part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, which aims to connect the region through infrastructure and trade. For the first time in 20 years, Ethiopia and Eritrea have reopened their border. Free movement across the border is believed to boost the trade between the two neighbors. Thousands of people, along with officials from both sides, gathered to celebrate the opening ceremony in Zalambesa in Ethiopia. The two countries began hostile relationships after the 1998-2000 war over border demarcation that left more than 80,000 people dead. In July, the leaders of both sides signed a peace agreement to restore ties and have made significant progress since then. Catalonia's pro-independence movement has rallied in Barcelona. Around 1 million people have demonstrated for the region's National Day. They are also calling for the release of imprisoned Catalan leaders, who they call political prisoners. And that brings us to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisiotv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Talisio English, I'm Sony Gray. Thank you for watching.
Enjoy our programming from Monday